On behalf of the Department of Communication, I am Marcia Gons-Wupeutui. Welcome to the Council of Ministers press briefing for today, Wednesday, January 31st, 2018. The press briefing is now officially open. Minister of Public Housing, Spatial Development, Environment and Infrastructure, the Honorable Mykolos Hitison, will not be making any opening remarks today, but is available for questions. At this time, I'd like to invite to the podium Minister of Finance, the Honorable Michael Ferrier. Minister.
Good morning, members of the press, people at home, people listening all over the world, through the internet. I have been thinking about several things and trying to come up with ideas. So been writing down some notes and have a kind of a lengthy opening speech, if you will, or opening statement. But basically what it comes down to is that we find ourselves in a place where we have an island that is disrupted, an island that is in need of reconstruction, an island that is in need of help. So the question on everyone's mind is, how do we get St. Martin going again? People have been displaced, businesses have been disrupted, and in the general, normal life has been affected. St. Martin must recover, and the quicker and the better that we do it, the more advantageous it is to all of us. Everyone has a role to play, and everyone is connected. My job as Minister of Finance is to manage the resources so that government services can be funded, and that is quite a task. The short of it is, for us to do what we have to do as government, we need to have money in the coffers. To get money in the coffers, we need taxes to be paid. To get taxes paid, we need to help people get back in business as soon as possible. There are parts of our economy that are going to be out for a while. For example, the hotels that are damaged or destroyed, restaurants, small and large retail outlets, food stores, car rentals, and even the mom-and-pop entrepreneurs. Most are in the process of rebuilding their lives and livelihoods. As long as their business is not operating, they cannot contribute. They generate no sales, cannot employ people, and cannot pay taxes or fees. Without income from taxes and fees, government cannot finance public services. It is a vicious cycle. It is important that people and businesses are accommodated by government. Now more than ever, the public service has to step up and facilitate the comeback of business activity on St. Martin. And in between all the chaos and destruction, government has to be a stabilizing force that will balance the responsibility to regulate with a desire to facilitate. In other words, we need to be proper and orderly, but also as practical as possible. These are not normal times, ladies and gentlemen, and through government, and though government has processes and procedures that must be followed, we have to acknowledge that both business and people and individual citizens will be best served if we can find practical solutions to deal with government's bureaucracy if we are to truly facilitate recovery of the island. Let me give an example. Say a businessman wants to fix his store. He wants to do this as quickly as possible, so he hires a neighbor who he knows is good at construction. This neighbor wanted to, but never started his own company. Because of the great need after Irma, this neighbor pulls the trigger and decides to start up his own construction business. But just as in normal times, the new entrepreneur will be required to complete a procedure of establishing his business. This procedure can take a long time, even in regular times. It is important that his opportunities are not stifled, while government cannot break the rules and should not turn a blind eye to those who have who operate without regard for the rules, I feel we need to be practical and find ways and means to track and fast-track government. We need to provide expedited service to the public. In the example I just gave, it would be extremely helpful if the government apparatus could bundle their forces across ministries and departments to assist the new entrepreneur in getting his business properly established, quickly and efficiently. In the case of my example, the neighbor needs to start his construction company and operate without fear of being on the wrong side of the law. He needs to be guided through the process, and he needs help. Helping him means we help St. Martin. His business will contribute to the economy because it will be hiring people. People who otherwise would be unemployed. By being properly registered and licensed, his construction company will have to pay its fair share and thereby contribute to society. The businessman who contracted his construction company can then reopen his business, take on employees, who then will pay wage taxes, and the business will pay other taxes like TOT and help St. Martin help itself. You see, it is a vicious circle. What we don't want are businesses that are not properly set up or entrepreneurs who give up because the process is too cumbersome. We should not stifle entrepreneurship. People have to be practical. Government has to be equally practical so that the economy gets a jump start. A quicker recovery means that a larger part of the workforce can stay or be employed. New businesses bring new employment. Employed persons are able to support their families. Employed people get a paycheck, and then they keep the money flowing in the economy by shopping in local stores. Employed people pay taxes. Taxes are needed to provide public service and for reconstruction programs. I bring up this topic because many are talking, texting, or posting on social media about the long waits for government services. When I see these stories, I worry about lost opportunities to stabilize our fragile public finances. Without new approaches and out-of-the-box thinking, government is facing financial nightmares. Liquidity support from the Dutch is all well and good, but for now and until we get a clearer picture on the format in which the committed 550 million euros will get to St. Martin, it seems to be at the expense of the reconstruction fund. And I have to go on record here to say, for once, I am in agreement with Mr. Bosman and Mr. Van Raak when they say that the entire 550 million euro fund should be used for the reconstruction of St. Martin, and we need to find another solution for our liquidity support. The Ministry of Finance cannot do this alone. The government ministries have to be cooperative and collaborative in the interest of the citizens and in the benefit of this country. If government agencies and departments can come together to develop ways to accommodate the business community, it will pay dividends. Government will be able to improve the tax base. The taxes collected will allow funding of public services and reconstruction efforts. As Minister of Finance, I want to join with my colleagues at VRAMI, TEAT, and AZED to develop practical solutions. My proposal is the establishment of a multidisciplinary team, including persons from the Chamber of Commerce, the Tax Inspectorate, the Receiver, and Economic Affairs, for example, who can quickly and efficiently guide a new business through the procedures and the red tape of government. We should not let them fall between the cracks or frustrate them into operating against the rules. Remember what I said on radio, we should not be practicing to say no. We need to find ways to say yes. This is not business as usual. We are literally fighting against time to stabilize our financial situation. There are practical solutions to the problem. It's a question of will and desire to be a part of the solution. I will ask my colleague ministers and their respective staff to help us organize a meeting of the various stakeholders to discuss the multidisciplinary action and the multidisciplinary approach. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Minister Ferrier, for those opening remarks. At this time, I'd like to invite to the podium Minister of Public Health, Social Development and Labor, the Honorable Emma Lee.
Good morning, Marcia. Good morning. Good morning to those listening by radio, television, or internet. First off, I'd like to welcome my colleague ministers. You know, we've had a number of Council of Ministers meetings under our belt, and I must say the meetings are long because there is a steep learning curve, but the atmosphere in those Council of Ministers meetings are intense. They are extremely positive, extremely constructive, and it is a pleasure working with you. A couple of topics. The new St. Martin General Hospital. Based on a combination of both written and verbal commitments, we believe that we have finally secured the full amount of funds necessary to build the main hospital building for the new St. Martin General Hospital. We're in the process of finalizing all of the documentation, so loan documentations and different contracts. I'm hopeful that the formal signing can take place within the next few weeks. We are working very hard to make sure that this is completed as soon as possible. A total of approximately 135 million guilders has been secured via both via financial institutions from both St. Martin and Curaçao. You know, we're very grateful to our partners in Curaçao. You know, when I was there a few weeks ago, we had a number of meetings, and the atmosphere there and the tone there where they said, you know, look, we sympathize with what's happened in St. Martin, and we certainly want to do our part to help. I found that to be very comforting, very reassuring. The total investment is based on post-Irma specifications, meaning that obviously after Hurricane Irma, there's a recognition that we needed to revisit the design specifications and agreed that there was some necessity to improve the structure to make sure that it was resistant to Category 5+ hurricanes. In order to fund the upgrades to make the hospital hurricane resistant, some modifications to the layout may need to be made. The evaluation process is anticipated to be completed shortly. Our hope is that the construction could begin as early as March or April. The construction is projected to take 3 years. Besides the obvious health benefits, where we are bringing quality health care close to home, keep in mind this is also job creation. From the time the construction starts to the completion, there's obviously construction jobs that are going to be available for our people. But this also represents an opportunity for economic diversification. It's my belief that as we make St. Martin, the new General Hospital, a medical center of excellence, that we should bring patients from neighboring islands to St. Martin, and that represents an economic activity, and that represents an increase in jobs and well-paying jobs. In recognition that the hospital is really just a building and that we need to ensure that the quality of care that the hospital delivers is also improved as we improve the range of services. For that purpose, recently a delegation from FCV, or Fundación Cardiovascular de Colombia, visited St. Martin. They met with the Ministry of VSA, obviously, myself, SZV, and SMMC. It's interesting to note that FCV is actually the first hospital in Colombia to become JCI accredited in 2009. For those that don't know, JCI accreditation is an international standard that's used to certify the quality of different healthcare institutions. This is a globally recognized certification. And one of St. Martin's objectives is for the new St. Martin General Hospital to become JCI accredited. The delegation from FCV included the president, Dr. Victor Castillo, their business director, Dana Chahin, and their administrative director, Norberto Morales, who is also their JCI expert. So the first two, the president and the business director, they came for a couple of days for meetings, but the JCI expert stayed for a week, and he worked together with the SMMC in terms of trying to help them to develop a plan to work towards JCI accreditation. Amongst some of the other points that we discussed, for example, together with SZV, is how do we improve and streamline the referral process? So in other words, as we're sending patients abroad, how do we make that process as seamless and as efficient as possible? As I mentioned already, they brought their JCI expert, but also closer cooperation with SMMC. For example, some discussions included the possibility of working towards having physicians from FCV rotate through St. Martin, and also the possibility of telemedicine. And actually, even more relevant these days, there was discussions about the possibility of a medical charter flight. With the issues that Insulair and PAWA are having, the transportation of our patients to referring hospitals is becoming more and more difficult. Another topic I'd like to touch on, there's been some, let's say, rumors in the newspaper about large groups of construction workers coming to the island. As of yesterday, I checked with the department in terms of looking for statistics. From November 2017 to yesterday, there have been 38 vacancies submitted for construction-related positions. So that means companies that are probably looking for workers, either to bring in somebody with a work permit or just submitting the vacancy. We've had only 38 vacancies registered since November to now. And so far, the ministry has granted 3 permits, 2 for plumbers and 1 for a painter. So this notion that there's a large influx of construction workers, at least going through the Ministry of VSA, is simply not true. However, this does sort of leave a number of questions. I mean, it sparks my curiosity. Certainly, there's a lot more construction activity. Who's performing those construction activities? And I believe, as I've said from before Irma, St. Martin has a serious issue with compliance. This has been something that I've felt that needs to be worked on critically, and in these days, even more so. Personally, actually, the reconstruction economy, I believe, is as vibrant, if not possibly more vibrant, than a tourism economy. So in other words, the amount of insurance money, the amount of relief money that's coming into our economy is substantial. The issue, I believe, is that the reconstruction economy is a much less compliant economy. And it is up to government to make sure that we take all of our measures to make sure that the businesses that are coming, that are setting up here, are compliant. Anecdotally, we've had a couple of discussions, actually together with the Minister of Finance, for example. You know, there's a number of companies that appear to have come from abroad, set up construction businesses, but there's a formal process they need to go through. They need to get their business license registered, and these things take time. And without their business license registered, actually that means there's a host of other things that cannot happen, including registering to pay taxes, therefore registering, documenting their workers correctly. So it's my belief that there is a heavily non-compliant atmosphere out there. Now, we do recognize that we need to rebuild St. Martin. So we need to make sure we encourage the businesses, we encourage the workers to make sure that you're compliant, that you're paying your taxes, that you're registered and have health insurance. The ministry, together with Holland, we have gathered, they are providing a number of vehicles. It was one of our requests immediately after Irma, realizing that many of government vehicles have been damaged, and that made the going out of inspectors very, very difficult or impossible. We have received so far 5 vehicles, and we're expecting to receive a total of 14 vehicles. So a notice to the public, we encourage you quickly to become compliant. Register, we will help you to be compliant. I do believe that compliance should be the path of least resistance. So we want to make sure that you're compliant in paying your taxes, and we will help you to do that. But we will start ramping up our inspections. Anyone who is willing to work in the construction field is always welcome to come to the Department of Labor Affairs and register. So we will help to match people who are interested in working in construction with a job. For those who are interested but don't feel that they have the experience or the skills, there are a number of training programs that have popped up, one at White and Yellow Cross, for example. So there are training opportunities. And there's also a possibility you can register on www.jobopportunity.sx. So again, we encourage anyone who's willing or interested in working in the construction or rebuilding field to come in and register. In Council of Ministers, we approved the PEERS program yesterday. That is the Personal Incentives for Economic Recovery. It's a 2.5 million guilder project to start with. We expect that the project will expand as time goes on. And basically, it's a program that allows unemployed or underemployed persons to receive an income under the condition that they perform some sort of work or training or both. These are typically going to be community-based programs where, again, they will learn a skill and also serve the community. To give you an example, we do still have issues with vector control, so meaning that mosquito breeding sites is an issue, and especially post-Irma, there's still quite a bit of debris around the island. So the ministry, through the Department of CPS, obviously we want to control the breeding sites, which means basically a more depth into the neighborhood's cleaning campaign. And so we believe there's an opportunity to hire or to have a number of people working together and receive income for those services. We'll bring more details about that as the programs get more developed. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister Lee, for your opening remarks. At this time, I'd like to invite to the podium Minister of Education, Culture, Youth and Sports, the Honorable Urine Huete. Minister.
Thank you, Mrs. Bobertwie. Good morning. Especially, of course, good morning to my fellow ministers that I haven't seen this morning yet, members of the media, radio listeners, and all those viewing via internet. Good morning. As you know, I have now served as your Minister of Education, Culture, Youth and Sport for 2 weeks and 2 days. These 2 weeks have been indeed challenging, as many things have been happening simultaneously. I joined this press briefing a little bit later because of a very important meeting this morning also with the president of the WITU, the Unions for the Teachers, and it was a very fruitful and constructive meeting related to some of the concerns that the teachers has expressed through the Teachers Union related to sometimes matters of the extended hours, work days, matters related to their vacation days in the summer, matters related to fatigue, as they play, of course, a critical role in our community, and therefore the matter related to their compensation, and I would say their value in society, and the importance to have that reviewed and discussed extensively. I am happy to indeed inform you that we have good, sound, constructive agreements made for the way forward, addressing these type of matters, and I will further inform you also next week about the outcome and agreements that we made this morning. The primary task, of course, of this interim Romeo Marlin cabinet is to bring St. Maarten through these critical months ahead as we recover from one devastating hurricane season and prepare as a nation to face the seasons ahead. As I've indicated before, the Ministry of Education, Culture, Youth and Sport has indeed been significantly hit in terms of damages to our infrastructure, sports facilities, schools. I do not believe that there has been one school, cultural or sporting facility that has escaped unscathed. Damages, I've mentioned before, are summarized in the Ministry's resilience plan to be approximately between $40 and $60 million. And I do say this not to preach doom and gloom, but to indicate indeed and emphasize the enormous task ahead and create that level of understanding with the public and also through you, the media. A first expectation that I have is the availability of the insurance claim disbursement. Because everything we do starts with ourselves and our resilience and the availability that we can recover. I've recognized in the first 2 weeks, however, that it's been taking a little bit too long, and I fear that it's nowhere near enough with the anticipated under-insurance of the government insurance policy, which include the schools and the government-owned sports facilities and cultural facilities such as the library. I believe that the value of the ministry in the government-insured policies is approximately 60 to 70% of the insured value. I have emphasized the importance to this matter with my colleague ministers during the Council of Ministers, and we look forward to complete a very critical advice to the Council of Ministers, which remained lingering since last year, unfortunately. The advice should enforce the decision by the Council of Ministers to establish a core group, to which I would like to add a member representing education, sport and culture, as this will help to represent the interest of the schools and other organizations in the core task, responsibility and assignment to advise us as Council of Ministers. I would like to emphasize the importance, as I mentioned earlier, seeing the value of the education, culture, youth and sports facilities in our policy. The advice also clarifies how, indeed, a first advance that we recently received via NAGICO, a first advance of 1 million, should be prioritized and should be spent. And it has been emphasized and also discussed with NAGICO that this and more possible advances can be made available until the claim is fully settled, and to ensure that it goes to the critical priorities that we have in advance and prior to the hurricane season. And also I share with NAGICO and the core group that the priority of those advances should indeed go to the schools. I therefore am very happy that we were able this week to invite the core group back to the Council of Ministers and to discuss the progress made about the insurance claim and the critical decisions that we have to make quickly and swiftly to have that first advance applied and also more additional advances made available. Throughout the first 2 weeks, I have also, of course, been reminded by families and sports organizations that athletes and children are in dire need of recreational and a restart of sport programs and training facilities and activities. I've participated in an activity from a daycare center, an early stimulation program Saturday, and seen and have been inspired and supported by the families when they come out and organize these type of recreational activities. It really has to be emphasized that it is dearly needed. I therefore also urge the completion of and signed off the first of 2 advices for repairs of various sports facilities, such as the Melford Hazel sports facility, but also the sport facilities in the various communities, such as the basketball courts. That has my serious attention this week and will help to facilitate and support my meeting that I've scheduled with the NSI, the National Sports Institute, who are tasked to indeed secure the maintenance and oversee the process of the repairs. So that means that these advices, with additional funding made available through the emergency funds, will help them to execute that task. And it's only a minor first contribution, and I do realize that much more is necessary. The meeting with the NSI is scheduled early next week. And I also ensure, of course, that the partnership with the sport organization, the sport department of the ministry, is a successful and continues to be a successful one. I think we should applaud the initiatives of the sport department to ensure that we partner closely with the NSI and ensure that we organize those sport programs in the various communities. The Council of Ministers ensured and reiterated the importance of the approval of the budget 2018. And once indeed the budget of 2018 will be critically reviewed and debated in Parliament, especially related to our recovery, I hope that the proposed capital expenditures related to this ministry can create an additional avenue on top of what we mentioned as the insurance claim advancement, but also the necessary additional funding necessary to support the reconstruction. The consultations have been done in close partnership, as this of course relates to the third and of course most talked about option of the World Bank and the Dutch funding made available through the World Bank. The famous 550 million or whatever is remaining, as we've now realized. The ministry has been working tirelessly to ensure that we meet the requirements set by the World Bank. We have to make sure that we, of course, also take care of our day-to-day responsibilities, and I care to recommend the ministry for the clear advancement of the ministry's resilience plan. It has been a helpful instrument to further indeed detail the project plans. Yeah? We are able to submit project plans to address the urgencies. We are able to submit project plans to clarify which priorities indeed are considered relevant and priority for the entire Council of Ministers and the entire country. The ministry therefore has held several meetings with the World Bank representatives, and I also participated in one yesterday together with the Directorate of Foreign Affairs, and I have personally met with them, as I've mentioned, to indicate that this ministry in particular needs assistance immediately, as it is the one hardest hit. As minister, I have also requested a separate so-called theme or a separate chapter on education, and that it's not hidden under a chapter of social affairs, but that education stands as a vital priority in the overall National Recovery Plan. And to also therefore then ensure that sport, youth, cultural activities may not be a separate chapter, highlighting of the similar weight maybe to other areas mentioned in the National Recovery Plan. But I want to ensure that they are addressed and that they're seen as matters of economic recovery as well. When we discuss sport tourism, when we discuss cultural tourism, when I had the opportunity to participate in Art Heals, receiving 130 tourists last week from the cruise line industry. It is the way forward. It is very encouraging. It's also very encouraging to participate in art talks, when you listen to the creative talents that we have on island, off island, furthering their education elsewhere, participating in international concerts, dance opportunities, performances, participating in international tertiary education facilities. I just want to emphasize that culture nor the creative industry should be downplayed, but should be recognized as economic recovery possibilities. They are not soft, they are hardcore, and that's what I continue to champion and emphasize throughout this tenure that I have. As I mentioned, indeed, the ministry has submitted a variety of projects already. We are carefully reviewing which of these projects indeed meet the now requirement of the World Bank, saying, is this recovery or is this development? That is a critical difference that they've emphasized during the meeting I had with them yesterday, and which will therefore influence what will indeed be filtered and what will be recognized as something that will meet the requirements of the 550 million available. Projects such as the temporary relocation of the library, they have a critical function to stimulate literacy, but to also engage in other type of activities related to community development. The project related to monument restoration. Once we want to visit and re-welcome our tourists, we want to ensure and show pride of what we have to offer in terms of our monuments and our cultural heritage. A project related to risk preparedness and the training programs. I can be encouraged that we have very strong and positive partnership with UNICEF that has recognized the importance of risk and disaster preparations, training programs, not only for our teaching staff, but also for sport coaches, and the critical role that they have in the upcoming season. And I therefore indeed can inform you, members of the press, that we have received positive feedback, while they indeed, as I said, emphasize that we need to focus on recovery. We should not get laid back, that we believe that everything is recovering at a nice pace. No, the next season is ahead, and if we have to indeed secure and prepare our critical repairs for our schools, for sports facilities, it can be a long process because it is about good governance. It is about the matter of preparing a terms of reference for the repairs. It is about the public bidding process. Those type of things are critical, are emphasized by this Council of Ministers in terms of transparency, in terms of good governance. Those type of matters should not be downplayed, but that's why we need to have timely and urgent preparations. It is imperative that schools are fixed, that our sporting facilities are back in proper shape, so that our athletes can continue to train for local, regional and international competitions. Our monuments and cultural institutions help us to connect and to, as I mentioned, to celebrate our national identity. And they must be fully restored. It is very important that we continue not only move forward in this sense of normalcy after Hurricane Irma, but that we indeed totally ensure that we are prepared for the next hurricane season. I've had numerous successful meetings with key stakeholders, schools that are receiving pavilions, temporary housing, school facilities. I've met with USM, I have met with CBA, I have met with St. Martin Academy as some of the examples. I have met with a very critical organization on our island, and I take pride that I have been able to be present during some of their graduation ceremonies, the St. Martin Youth Brigade, and those type of organizations need to be supported. They should feel that we partner with them and that we facilitate and ease some of the concerns that they have, whether it's through an incidental subsidy, sometimes through an organization that they have expressed direly in 2017 already, or through partnerships to ensure indeed, for instance, that CBA is supported and their concerns recognized in terms of the sensitivity close to, of course, the landfill, where they have been experiencing nuisance related to flies or other type of discomfort. And for instance, the matter that they brought to my attention that they need to even possibly vacate the pavilion before the hurricane season and maybe even already in April. And their efforts that I would like to encourage to seek alternative housing emphasizes that organizations should not wait for government, should initiate, should stay as much as possible in the lead of their respective interests, and that government should partner and accelerate wherever we can. Of course, everybody emphasized the importance of the USM. I would like to inform you, of course, that we had a memorandum of understanding that was brokered and negotiated and signed by the previous minister. We will value and therefore closely monitor how that the agreements are lived up to. I was happy to receive the first set of financial or the second set actually of the financial reports as one of the conditions, so that we have transparency, openness about indeed funds received thus far. And on our end, we indeed need to live up to ensure the availability of the ordinance for higher education. I've informed them as such that we are progressing and that it seems that we are able to live up to the expectations set and to have therefore the advanced and more completed draft available in March for their review and consultation before it heads back to the Council of Ministers for their approval and its further process to the Parliament. Both parties were happy, satisfied, have been able to indeed celebrate and recognize the USM's ability to reopen and restart classes, including indeed the teacher educational program, a program that we all value so much to counter set some of the shortfalls that we have. And yeah, so these type of things are kind of encouraging. More stakeholder sessions will follow. As I mentioned, it will continue to be an enormously challenging week ahead with the recovery. We will always weigh the meetings with stakeholders in regards to the role that they play in the recovery. And I will emphasize these type of partnerships to ensure that we all continue to work together in the interest of building the resilience and reconstructing and building back better. In closing, I was happy to attend a recent presentation and lecture of the Lionel Bernard Scott Memorial Lecture at the University of St. Martin this weekend, and it was a wonderful and professional lecture by Neil Henderson of Henderson Insurances. And being a previous lecturer myself, I indeed purchased 2 of the books of past lecturers, the late Vance James Jr. and the late Camille Bailey, as we recognize that we stand on the shoulders of heroes that we have on island. Mr. James, during his 2005 lecture, bear with me, spoke these words that I find so inspiring and used to remind ourselves. He says, "Our future has, is being shaped by not waiting on others to do, but doing for ourselves, anchored in the belief we can. This belief is evident in the lives and actions of our people throughout our history in every area. Not accepting we can't, believing yes we can." And can you imagine? That goes back to 2005. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Minister Waiter, for those opening remarks. At this time, I invite to the podium Honorable Prime Minister Leona Romeo Marlin.
A pleasant good morning to one and all. Today's briefing goes as follows. Last week, the World Bank team started its preparatory activities for the recovery and reconstruction of St. Martin. The Ministry of General Affairs, and especially the Department of Foreign Relations, has worked tirelessly to assist and facilitate the World Bank team. Over the next couple of weeks, the World Bank team will continue with various preparatory activities. The Ministry of General Affairs will continue to assist in organizing meetings and preparing the relevant legal documents. It is expected that the first draft of the National Recovery Plan 2.0 will be sent to the Council of Ministers in the week of February 12th. The second step is that the Netherlands and the World Bank will conclude a reimbursable advisory services, I'll call it RAS, contract. This contract formalizes a number of roles of the World Bank. Legal experts of the Netherlands, St. Martin, and the World Bank are currently discussing the structure of this contract, including the possibility of subsidiary agreement, formal letter in which St. Martin acknowledges specific obligations vis-à-vis the World Bank. Meanwhile, St. Martin has provided input on the terms of reference for the reimbursable advisory services. The terms of reference has been approved by the Council of Ministers on January 18th. Based on this terms of reference, the World Bank is currently fulfilling its roles. Part of the RAS, so the reimbursable advisory services, will be executed before the establishment of the trust fund, whereas other activities such as capacity building can continue after the trust fund is operational. The establishment of the trust fund will happen on the basis of a specific documents, one being the administrative agreements between the Netherlands and the World Bank. This legally binding agreement between the World Bank and the Netherlands that establishes the conditions under which the funds are accepted and executed. The Netherlands will provide funds to the World Bank in stages, so in portions, tranches. The Netherlands intends to pay everything out of the 550 million euros that is reserved for the reconstruction of St. Martin. This includes the different stages to the World Bank, the cost of the additional border control, the setting up of the integrity chamber, existing and future budget, liquidity support, and you heard my Minister of Finance say that should be excluded, early recovery projects outside of the trust fund, and possible additional projects. At this moment, I would like to thank the Dutch Second Chamber for their kind words and understanding. We look forward for their support and cooperation. I want to also thank the ministries, civil servants, and persons that have made a contribution in one way or another thus far in this process with the World Bank and the Netherlands to ensure that the recovery and reconstruction of St. Martin takes place in a proper manner. Secondly, on Monday, I met with Mr. Jason Rogers of the Central Voting Bureau to get an update on the preparations of the elections on February 26. The advices to establish the voting districts and the voting district leaders are moving through the government apparatus to be executed. As it relates to the distribution of voting cards, the Central Voting Bureau has proposed the following steps. The distribution via substation throughout the districts on St. Martin. The post office will deliver in cards that may be left after those distributions in the substations. And as prescribed by law, 8 days before the election, if there are any remaining voting cards, persons can come to the civil registry, of course, with proper identification and receive a duplicate card. Going forward, a PR campaign will be executed by the Central Voting Bureau and the Civil Registry Department over the coming weeks. This also includes information regarding the guidelines for public order by the Ministry of Justice. The process of establishing the Integrity Chamber continues as civil servants in the Netherlands and St. Martin continue with deliberations. A timeline of a minimum 3 months has been established, during which time a candidate from St. Martin and the Netherlands will be proposed, and then these two persons will jointly select the chairman. Another notice is that Civil Registry Department, starting today in Simpson Bay, that PSC department will be open for services. It's worthy to note that there are some issues as it relates to IT. However, the public can go for registration forms, certificates, and declarations. The opening hours at PSC are as follows. Monday, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays from 8 a.m. to 12 p.m., and from 1 p.m. to 3:30. On Wednesdays, it's from 8 p.m. to 12 p.m. I will repeat, at PSC Simpson Bay, services for registration forms, certificates, and declarations will be open to the general public on Monday, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays from 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. and from 1 p.m. to 3:30 p.m. On Wednesdays from 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. From today until February 14th, the Civil Registry here in Phillipsburg is giving our citizens the opportunity to apply for driver's licenses, ID cards, passports, or registration forms without appointments on the following days, with a maximum of 30 numbers will be given out each day. Monday, Tuesdays, Thursdays, between 3:30 and 5:30, any product, but remember, 30 numbers only. Wednesday, January 31st, that's today. Wednesday, February 7th. Wednesday, February 14th, from 12:30 until 5:30, walk-ins for registration forms. I want to publicly thank the Civil Registry Department and the PSC for their efforts to alleviate the long lines, despite certain setbacks and challenges that they face, and their understanding the need to improve customer service throughout this organization. I want to also thank my Council of Ministers, my colleagues, for the tireless efforts that we have made and the time that we have put in the long meetings to ensure that we stay on course, and I encourage each and every one of you all to stay on course as we go through this recovery process together.
Management of the Civil Registry Department would like to inform the public that for the upcoming parliamentary elections, all eligible voters must be in possession of a valid identification document. Due to this legal requirement, the Civil Registry is giving all eligible voters the opportunity to apply for your identification cards without appointments on the following days: Saturday, January 20th, Saturday, January 27th, Saturday, February 3rd, Saturday, February 10th, and Saturday, February 17th. Opening hours are between 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. only for the application of ID cards. If you're a resident of St. Martin, a Dutch national, 18 years or older, eligible to vote, and your ID card is expired or lost, this is a great opportunity to come in and renew your ID card prior to the elections without an appointment during our Saturday special. This special is not intended for other transactions. For more information, call 542-0652. This message was brought to you by the Civil Registry, a department of the Ministry of General Affairs.
At this time, we'll go over to the question and answer session. The floor is now open for questions from the media. Mr. Moore, do you have a question?
Mr. Minister, you talked about expediting service to the general public as well as the managing resources, which of course falls directly into your lap. But you also mentioned that the stabilizing of government income is important. I'd just like to know exactly when do you think that that offset would be able to come into play? And in addition to that, we all know there's a serious issue with compliance as it relates to taxes as well as other things. And I was wondering how you plan to deal with that to be able to get the stabilizing of government income as quickly as possible.
Well, thank you very much for that question, Mr. Moore. But I believe in my presentation or in what I just mentioned before, we just need to, as government, be as customer service minded as we can be in order to facilitate or rather accommodate those people that are in business and that want to be in business, because the key to St. Martin coming back is in the economy recovering. St. Martin has been known to be a place where sometimes, in spite of government interference or government government's input, the economy has been growing because of the way the private sector has been pushing things and getting business done. So we encourage businesses to get back up on in line and get back on stream, and we need to help them to do so. This will prevent a trend of going underground with the business. Underground, I mean doing business and not reporting the business, out of reach of the tax inspectorate, out of reach of the SZV. So we want people to be as legitimate as possible in accordance with the laws of the country, and we must make sure that their effort to want to be that is not hampered by the bureaucracy. So basically my plea is to all civil servants and all of the ministries to come up with ways and means to be customer friendly. And in doing so, we would hopefully improve the tax collection, which again will help us help ourselves.
Thank you, Mr. Moore, for that question. Lyndon, you have the floor.
To Minister Lee, Minister of Labor, you said there are some vacancy in construction. Do you have a category of employment prices, like a laborer, a qualified worker? Because what happened, people just wild. Everybody just charging a price. Things in the supermarket, in the store are gone up. Do you have a category of prices, of price range for workers here on the island?
If I understand your question correctly, Lyndon, that does government set any sort of control on wages? No, other than obviously there's a minimum wage, but in our reconstruction economy, unfortunately, there is very much an issue of supply and demand. So there's a lot of demand for construction workers, for people to rebuild their homes. I don't believe, at least anecdotally, I understand that it's very difficult to find construction companies, to find construction workers, and so naturally those employees and companies are charging a premium for their services. So we don't regulate that. Capitalism, market forces, supply and demand will dictate those prices.
Thank you, Lyndon, for that question. Mr. Moore, do you have another question for the council?
If I may,
Go right ahead.
the question, I realize that there's a procedure, so I'm trying to work
Yes, you
with
were
it.
not here
Yeah,
for quite some time.
That's right.
Understandable.
But I'm not done with Mr. Ferry yet, because I really need to know where does he expect to get the funds from to offset the liquidity problem, when he mentioned that he agreed with two of the Dutch members of parliament who said that that should be taken care of differently, and the 550 million euros should be spent primarily for recovery. So I just wanted to know if we can expect raising taxes anytime soon, or where that money is going to come from.
Well, definitely nowhere am I thinking about raising taxes, especially not at this time. I think we have an instrument called the Central Bank of Curaçao and St. Martin, an institution called the Central Bank of Curaçao and St. Martin. And I believe that there we can probably get some ideas as to how to go about this. On the other hand, I could think of maybe a solution like the kingdom making maybe another 450 million euro available to us at a very, very soft loan rate, payable over a very long time with maybe a balloon payment in 10 years. So there's many ways that we can skin this cat, as long as there is the will and the desire to help St. Martin get back on its feet. And I definitely agree that we, on our side, should make sure that we don't abuse things, that we don't misspend, that we don't abuse, that we keep our spending in line, open and transparent, and work on compliance. Because we have caused, we as in the past, St. Martin has caused some of its own problems without a doubt. And we need to recognize that. We need to recognize that compliance has not always been on the top of the mind of those that came before us. But we are government. We are a continuation of government, and we intend to make a difference. As short a time as we are here, this Prime Minister is dedicated, she's rallied us, and she has asked us to find ways and means to be open, transparent, intuitive. You can call all the adjectives you want, but we need to make sure that when we leave office, we will have made a difference in the thinking of how to go about the business of government of St. Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Moore, for that question. Lyndon, the floor is yours.
Should I say congratulations to Minister Gittison and the conversation of the dump? A lot of time people will speak negative, but the dump has a lot of financial resources. And you told us that you had a meeting, an ongoing meeting with GB. How far are we?
Good morning. Thanks for the question. The discussions with GB and government are still going, and the respective parties are still ongoing at the moment. How far are we? We're still in the beginning phase of the discussions. Yes, so thanks.
Thank you, Lyndon, for that question. Do we need to have one more round of questions? Mr. Moore?
Yes, certainly.
Okay.
We have 5 ministers.
The floor is yours.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Minister Lee, you did in fact mention that you were the one who raised the issue, as a matter of fact, of compliance, and you refer to it as serious. However, you in your response, right after you mentioned that you're getting some cars, and I take that to mean that there would be an attempt of some kind to enforce this compliance issue as it relates to these companies and the workers. But is there going to be any consistency on your part? Because sometimes what we do is we go out, we do one check, and then we just leave it, and everything just falls right back to normal. And is these new automobiles that you get is going to be helpful, and can we look forward to a consistency in dealing with this issue?
Great question, Wendell. Thank you. So let me explain a couple parts. If you notice out back, you'll see there's a whole line of government vehicles that are all damaged. So government has an issue in general that especially the executing departments don't have the vehicles to be able to go out and actually perform their tasks. As Minister of VSI, I recognized this already very quickly after Irma, and therefore made the requests to Holland for assistance with replacement of those vehicles. So we are anticipated to receive 14 vehicles. Up until now, the labor inspectors, even vector control, all of these people have been hampered in their activities because they haven't had the ability to be mobile. So like I said, we've received 5 already. We expect to receive more. So obviously you cannot expect the inspectors to work if they don't have the resources. So that's one of our focal points, and I believe we're making good progress on that. In terms of consistency, one thing that I find very cumbersome in government is that each of the different ministries have different compliance officers. So in other words, when the labor inspectors go out, if they find there are undocumented workers working on a job site, the tools that they have, in other words, they cannot pick up those people and deport them. That has to be done through immigration. So if we find that the company isn't registered, that goes to TIAD inspectors. So what I've found previously is, and you know this, Wendell, I've gone out a number of times with the inspectors to get a feeling for what was happening out there. And I always found that there was way too much non-compliance, and I believe that's only gotten worse. But the cooperation between the ministries previously was not ideal. I believe that with the new Council of Ministers, I believe that everybody is on the same page in terms of we need to improve compliance. Remember that when you go out there and you find construction workers that are undocumented, not paying taxes, not paying their health insurance, right? That is an opportunity for one of our people to fill that position, right? And so we need to make sure that if we want our people to have as much employment as possible, we need to make sure those positions are above boards, above, on the table. And if we don't have people available, then you need to register, you need to pay your taxes, you need to pay your premiums, and help us fund our recovery process. So for me personally, have always been from previous government, that compliance is critical. Remember, if you have a business, if you have 2 construction companies that are competing in the marketplace, one is non-compliant, doesn't pay their taxes, doesn't pay their premiums, how do you expect a compliant business to compete, right? Their cost of doing business is much higher. So they're going to get less jobs, they make less profit to invest in their equipment and new skills, new tools. So compliance is critical for this country going forward for the next, going forward period, but especially in our reconstruction economy, it's critical that the economy is a compliant economy.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Lyndon, you have the last question before we close the floor.
Okay, to the Minister of Education. You're going to hear me say time to time, congratulations. You're going to hear me say time to time, congratulations. Last week, you spoke about the drive to solidify our youngster. It seemed like some older people are getting jealous. Do you have a plan to solidify older people above 35? Because there's a lot of skillful people on the island, and they can do the job, but they do not certify. Do you have that in plan?
I'm not sure whether I get your question, but whether I have a plan to enforce and support lifelong learning, to ensure that there are people that meet the qualifications necessary for the labor market.
That's right.
Right? We've emphasized with this ministry the importance of lifelong learning. That's why we emphasize and we'll meet today with NIPA as a critical vocational learning institute recently established. Recently, I would say the last 4 or 5 years, only receiving subsidy over the last 2-3 years. And therefore, that is a message and a support that we need to reinforce and further expand to indeed ensure that lifelong learning is supported. That means it is considered a tertiary institute for those that just complete their secondary education as an opportunity there. But what we have indeed seen more and more is that there are increased numbers of those already in their ages of 30 and up that also use NIPA as an opportunity, which is very interesting to review. And I would like to have that consultation with them to see how they have been doing in this new academic year, what the numbers are, where the needs and the interest for the type of programs that we need so that we can support. That's one. NIPA on the level of vocational training, which we've emphasized for opportunities for growth, including the construction industry. 2, of course, USM, which is then the institution for more extensive tertiary education, which can also be entered by secondary school students that exit and complete their diploma and their studies, but also should be indeed seen for lifelong learning. And the experience has been with USM, as you may indeed know, Mr. Linden, that many of the students attending the classes and the programs of USM are indeed doing that to further enhance their career and possibilities to further and create upward mobility for themselves. So yes, I am in support of it. That means that we indeed also need to secure that the relevant funding is available and that the resources are available, but that we also partner with the organizations to understand where they have had positive experiences that need to be further encouraged, and where additional programs need to be developed, and what they would then expect from my ministry in terms of a partnership to ensure that those programs are certified and recognized so that you can indeed seek employment here or elsewhere, as we all so dearly care about. I hope I'm able to have answered your question.